Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Visit NC webinar for June. I'm happy to be able to present to you today. I'm Marlise Taylor, Director of Research for Visit NC, and happy to be able to share with you some recent research and an early look at 2022. We're going to jump right in, though, and get going. And I will say that if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A and not the chat. We'll be monitoring that, and we will get to questions at the end if you do have them. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we dig into the actual data, I just want to share with you where you can find this data and more data on the tourism industry in North Carolina. Many of you probably already know about it, but just in case you don't, our partners page offers a variety of research and trackers that you can access and use regularly. And you'll find that on partners.visitnc.com/research. So this is what it looks like on the main research page. And then over there on the left, you can see the different separate pages that you can go to find the research. So please, bookmark that and take a look at that when you get a chance. So we saw in North Carolina, I want to kind of recap 2021 here, but we saw major recovery naturally in 2021 with $28.9 billion in visitor spending. Domestic travel actually saw new heights and made it back and recovered. International travel, of course, lagged as the borders were still closed for the majority of the year. But the total and spend fell just 1% below the record set in 2019 and was a 45% increase from the pandemic-stricken 2020. So we were really pleased with these numbers showing a recovery. Each sector within the tourism economy saw great growth from 20 to 21. Spending and lodging, food service, retail, and auto transportation even topped previous highs set in 2019. Visitation to and within the state increased 19% in 2021 from 20. Mountain region visitors increased 13%. Piedmont region visitors increased 9%, and coastal region visitors increased 39% from 2020. And so you can see here on the map, the markets of origin for North Carolina are largely back to normal after that initial phase of the pandemic saw more visitation from closer by markets. Of course, we still have the majority of our visitation from those contiguous states, but you can see this looks a little bit more back to normal. The majority of North Carolina visitors in 2021 traveled to and within the state for leisure purposes, both overnighters and day trippers. Approximately 5% of overnighters and 6% of day trippers were business travelers in 2021. And we realize business travel is still struggling a bit, but remember, we are primarily a leisure travel state. So we typically see those numbers in more the 90-10 or 88-12 range for statewide, but we're getting there. Again, leisure is by far the top primary purpose of visit for each region of the state. 55% of business travelers to the mountain region say that they actually extended their business trip for leisure last year, while 38% of Piedmont visitors and 45% of coastal business travelers extended their stays for leisure. More of the out-of-state visitors were first-time visitors to the state in 2021, and that may seem too intuitive, but with North Carolina welcoming so many new residents, we do take a look at in-state visitors and how they're traveling as well. But the majority of overnight visitors, both resident and out-of-state, were repeat visitors. So we do a really good job in North Carolina of building loyalty with our visitors. The coastal region actually welcomed a slightly higher proportion of first-time visitors last year than the other regions, but you can see here that they're all pretty similar. 35% of the overnight visitors last year were in-state residents, which is about back to pre-pandemic levels. Typically, we see between 30 and 40% of North Carolinians traveling within the state and representing the largest share of that pie. But as you can see, that means about 65% or so of our overnight visitors are actually from out of state. So those next 9 states after the in-state travelers represent about 46% of our overnight visitors to the state. So while that, in-state is the largest share, we do see many more visitors from outside of the state. So here's my attempt to try to squeeze as much as I can into one slide. I hope this is not too confusing. Again, all this data is available on our partners page, but I just wanted to kind of show you the differences between markets of origin to the different regions. So nearly 40, let's go with the coast first. Nearly 40% of overnight visitors last year were in-state residents. So the coastal region saw a little bit higher proportion of North Carolina residents traveling. The next 10 states represented about 47% of overnight visitors to the coastal region. So the mountain region, about 31% of overnight visitors were North Carolina residents. And the next 10 states for the mountains represent 56% of the visitors to the mountain region. So you can see that they have fewer states being represented, but higher percentages. And then the Piedmont region, just over 30% of overnight visitors in 2021 were in-state residents. And the next 10 states represented about 49% of visitors to the Piedmont region. So the Piedmont region sees slightly more out-of-state residents. Out-of-state travelers. So seasonality, and many of you know this from your own destinations, but we do like to look at it statewide and regionally. But overnight visitors statewide were indeed most likely to visit last year in the summer season, followed by spring and fall. And if you remember, we have the Delta kind of leading into the fall, the Delta variant that may have impacted some fall travel. The summer season was by far the most popular for overnight visitors to the coast. And the mountain region also saw more visitors in the summer. The Piedmont region, a little more consistently seasonal last year, but with a slight edge to summer season. So that's pretty typical for the Piedmont to see kind of more of an even visitation pattern within seasons. So again, this data also shows us that we are getting back to normal. I think we'll see probably a little more fall pick up this year, assuming we don't see another variant, but I think that we're getting back to normal here seasonally. So let's look at length of stay to North Carolina. You hear us say often that out-of-state visitors spend more and stay longer. Well, that is indeed true according to our data. Out-of-state visitors stay about 38% longer on their travels in North Carolina than in-state travelers. Again, it makes sense. You travel further, you want to stay longer, but this is indeed the case when we look at the numbers. Coastal region visitors stay about 26% longer than mountain or Piedmont visitors. So I don't know, it could be the week-long beach rental or whatnot, but they do tend to stay about 26% longer than the other regions. Statewide, and each of the 3 regions have the largest proportion of visitors who stay in hotels and motels while traveling to and through North Carolina, followed by those who stay in private homes. You can read this as visiting friends and relatives, probably. Again, this is survey data, so it's slightly subjective. So people are going to check the boxes that make sense to them, but I read this as friends and family. The coastal region naturally has a significantly higher proportion of visitors who stay in rental homes and condos and personal second homes than the other regions. And the mountains see a larger proportion of visitors staying in a shared economy rental, such as Airbnb or VRBO. We did see that drastically increase during the pandemic. So the mountain regions are definitely seeing that. So let's look at spending. The top categories for spending for overnight visitors to the state include lodging, food and beverage, and transportation. Overnight visitors spend 95% more on average than day trip visitors, which makes sense without the lodging. And again, here's the out-of-state versus in-state. Out-of-state visitors spend 51% more than resident travelers, or they did last year. So again, we heard a few slides back that they're staying longer, but they're also spending more, both as a result of that longer stay, but also as a nature of when you're spending out of state, you're typically going to spend a little bit more. Overnight visitors to the coast spent more per trip in 2021 than visitors to the other regions. They spent about 41% more than mountain visitors and about 62% more than Piedmont visitors. However, remember that length of stay for coastal visitors is longer. So what I did here is I also looked at per party per day spending. So the coastal spend is still a little bit higher, but only about 5% higher than the daily spend for parties for mountains. So when you do look at that length of stay, it evens it out a little bit more. So we do know that coastal visitors are staying longer. This is a little difficult to read, but I tried to put in, the top 10 or so activities that visitors say that they participated in the regions and then statewide. Visiting friends and relatives, shopping, visiting historic sites, and sightseeing were the top activities were within that top 10 for each region in 2021. Fine dining was also important, and we saw that make a comeback in 2021. Visitors to the mountains tend to participate in more activities while traveling than do visitors from the other regions, and we've seen that consistently over the years. This isn't really a new trend, but you can see mountain region visitors doing a variety of activities, whether that's because coastal region visitors tend to visit the beach and not as much else or not, but we have seen that consistently over the years. Again, I will make a note on this question. These are activities participated in, and these do not indicate purpose of visit. So we want to make sure that it's clear that these are not reasons to visit, but these are things to do when visitors are here in the state. In 2021, about 59% of resident overnight visitors made the decision to visit within 4 weeks of the visit. So you can see that shorter planning period. But just over 69% of out-of-state visitors decided on a visit less than 3 months out. So you can see that the out-of-state visitors are planning a little further out than in-state visitors. I don't think that's too surprising, though I will say that these numbers definitely have shortened over the last several years. Piedmont visitors make the decision to visit within a shorter time frame than the other regions. 41% actually decide less than 2 weeks before visiting. Coastal region visitors made the decision to visit farther in advance than other regional visitors, and that's likely due to the accommodations and needing to get those reservations set. Nearly a third of the coastal visitors actually decide to visit North Carolina 3 months or more before the visit. And again, these are averages for the whole year for many different lengths of stay, but this is, in total for the coastal region. We do see a longer planning period. So here are just some demographics I wanted to present to you. The regions don't see a whole lot of differences. There are some slight differences in ethnicity and race in terms of the visitors, but really they're not terribly different. I will say that coastal region visitors are a little more likely to include children in their travel parties than the other regions, particularly the Piedmont region. And you can see that there's a lot of business travel within the Piedmont region that maybe would preclude people from traveling with children. But again, these demographic data are available in the reports that are available on the partners website. So let's move on briefly and take a look at where we stand so far in 2022. That was kind of the 2021 visitor profile. And again, we have our reports posted online, but let's look at some recent statistics and what's going on this year. So again, while hotel businesses and shared economy lodging are continuing to show improvements in 2022 in both demand and revenues, traditional home rentals are down a little in the first quarter from last year. With Easter falling early in April last year, this could be some of that explanation. So some spring break travelers could have been traveling in March last year, where it was more April this year. As more data becomes available, we'll be able to see a more complete picture. However, when we look at lodging data compared back to 2019, so we're looking at the first quarter of 2022 versus the first quarter of 2019, we do still have some ground to make up with regards to commercial lodging demand, room nights sold. So as you can see, statewide nights sold in shared economy, entire home rentals have grown tremendously since 2019. And traditional home rentals also show increase, but commercial lodging is still down slightly from 2019, so down from the pre-pandemic. With the volume of traditional hotel rooms in the more urban areas, it is still easy to see where that need is the highest. We get a quarterly forecast from STR, and the forecast shows that hotel demand, while much improved over 2020, it was still down by 8% from 2019. 2022 demand, or room nights sold this year, is expected to top those 2019 numbers by about 4%. So this year should recover us in terms of that commercial demand. Looking at revenues, while revenues were much improved, similar to demand from 2020, they're still down about 9% from 2019. 2022 revenues are expected to be about 8% higher than 2019. So again, some of the increase is attributed to that increased demand of 4% that we'll see, that we're expected to see, but also we know that rates have increased as well. So revenues are up, are expected to be up a little bit higher than room nights sold. Looking at some visitation trends year to date, the proportion of in-state versus out-of-state visitors, according to our latest device count data, is fairly typical for the first 4 months. This is through April, so it's a little more than the first quarter. It's pretty typical. The top out-of-state markets of origin are looking a little more normal than what we typically see from out-of-state markets, though Columbia does continue to rank higher than pre-pandemic levels. So that is something we saw during the pandemic, and we're still seeing as visitors from the Columbia, South Carolina area kind of coming in more so than they used to. We also look at the daily travel index from Arrivalist, and the daily drive market analysis shows that the projection of North Carolina travelers, and those are people who move at least 50 miles from their home and spend at least 2 hours away, was up about 23% in April, down a little from the pandemic high of July last year, but still a really good trajectory going into the summer season. And this is a new statistic that we're using, a new KPI that we're using, and it's called the Visitor Economy Index. And we've worked with Zartico to create this. We realized that just looking at lodging or just looking at device counts or just looking at spending really doesn't represent the entire tourism economy in North Carolina. So we have worked with them to create an index that takes all of those different metrics into account. And we're looking at this monthly and year to date. So this index, where 100 is the baseline, through March is at nearly, this is through April, is at 50.2%. So you can read this, that the tourism economy in North Carolina is performing about 50% better than the same time period last year. Again, this index represents different types of lodging as well as spending and device counts. And that is all I have for today. I tried to keep it short and sweet. Again, we do have all this data available on, or most of it, especially the visitor profile data, on our website. We also have a relatively new community dashboard on our partners page that hopefully some of you have looked at. And there you can find regional device counts and markets of origin for the broad regions of Coast, Piedmont, and Mountains. And you can also find the historical data that we've always shared, our lodging data, our shared economy data, and visitor spending data is now in a new location. So hopefully most of you all have seen that. And we will also have the county level spending there on that community dashboard when they become available in early August. So I know many of you all, wait for that all summer, but we're still looking at an early August deadline on that. I'm happy to answer any questions now if there are any. I haven't noticed any in the chat, but I can't really see the chat. So if you have any questions, I would love to answer any now. While I'm waiting on that, the next Visit NC webinar will be July 14th at 10 a.m. and we will share the topic and details and registration information on that via news link at a later date. So do we have any questions? Okay, is there a short one pager that we can share with our partners? We actually have 2 fast facts files on our partners page. If you go to partners.visitnc.com/research and click on fast facts, there are 2 one pagers, one more of a profile for North Carolina and one more of an economic impact for North Carolina. And I neglected to say that this recording will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So we are recording this and happy to share that with anyone you would like to. I'm also happy to create a PDF for the slides and get it to you if that would be more helpful than just the recording. Okay, Terry, I will get you a PDF. Absolutely. Are there any other questions? So it does look like there's some interest in a link for the slide. So let me work on that, and we will do something about possibly putting that in Newslink with a link to it. I'll see what I could do about posting it on our research page. That may be easier than emailing it out. That way you all will have access to a PDF. So we'll make sure that we get that taken care of. If there aren't any other questions, please know that I'm always available for your partners, and you can email myself or Ashton English, who is our data specialist, with any questions you may have, and we're happy to get back to you as soon as possible. But I hope you all have a great day, and I hope your summer is going terrific so far. Please take care, and we will see you on the next webinar, July 14th. Thanks so much.